Today I'd like to focus on the right hand and specifically how to use more than one finger when you're playing. In the intro lesson, all we did, we took our index finger and we used that finger to play everything because we weren't really playing fast rhythms or skipping strings too much, so we were able to get away with just one finger. But there will be times, whether it's for stamina reasons or just because it's so fast that you need to use more than one finger. So what we're going to try to do right now is on string number 1, we're going to start the way we did before. Thumb on the pickup, index finger on string number 1, and we're just going to take that finger and pull it through to rest on string number 2. Now there'll be a slight difference. What we did there is we actually rested our finger on the string and brought it through and played. But when we start using more than one finger, we're not going to be able to rest it on the string because what happens is it chokes or cuts off the note. So we want to try to have notes that are completely connected. For the most part, I mean, there'll be times when you want to separate them, but for right now, what we want to do is try to have them as smooth as possible. So let's start by taking your index finger and playing string number 1 multiple times. But when you do it, don't rest your finger on the string, just bring it right through. Same motion, but we're not going to rest before we do the scratching or the pulling motion on the string. Now we're going to try to do that with your middle finger, and we're going to replicate all the things we did in the first lesson, but with your middle finger. So let's start the way we did before on string number 4. We have your thumb on the pickup. This time we're going to use your middle finger, and we're going to use that scratching motion to bring your middle finger in and touch your thumb. Try that one more time. So middle finger resting on string number 4, and then we bring it in and just touch it to your thumb. Great, so now we're going to do the same thing we did before. We'll start on string number 1 with your middle finger. Now this will be a little bit easier because your middle finger is longer than your index, so it'll be easier to reach those higher strings, string number 1 and 2. So let's start with your finger resting on string number 1, and we're just going to follow through and rest on string number 2. This is called a rest stroke because you're resting your finger on the next string. And then we're going on, playing string number 2, resting on 3, playing 3, resting on 4, playing 4, resting on your thumb. It's the exact same thing we did before, except now we're using your middle finger instead of your index. So let's do the opposite. We're going to go 4, 3, 2, 1 with your middle finger. So again, you have to climb, you have to lift your finger every time. So string number 4, string number 3, string number 2, and finally string number 1. There we go. Nothing has changed except which finger we're using. So now we've gotten a little bit used to using that middle finger. We're going to try to put them together. So let's go on string number 4 because that'll be the least amount of stretch for your fingers. Later on, we're going to talk about moving the thumb across to different places, but for right now, we don't want to think about too many things at once. We're just trying to think about using these 2 fingers. So thumb resting on the pickup. We're going to start with your index finger on string number 4 and do exactly what we did. Pull through, touch your thumb. Now, follow that up with your middle finger doing the same motion, but not resting on the string. Very, very important. So middle finger comes through and rests on your thumb. Now there is one motion that is incredibly important when it comes to right hand, but we don't really think about too much. We think about pulling the string, but it's very rare that you consider the recovery or the pulling away from the string to reset and start again. That's equally as important as the actual picking of the string or plucking of the string. It's 2 halves of the same motion. If you're very fast on the way down, like this, but slow on the way up, then you'll stumble a little bit and it'll slow you down. So we're going to try the same thing again, but when you go to use your middle finger, so here we're going to start with the index finger playing string 4. As you start moving your middle finger to play the string, you have to move your index finger back and reset it back to the original position. And likewise, when you go to play your index finger, your middle finger will come and reset as well. Now, in the beginning, you might knock the string as you're going back and resetting because you're following the same arc, the same path with your finger, but we're going to try and lift it a little bit as we go past the string so we don't mute it or stop it from ringing. All right, so let's do that a couple times. We're going to go index. As the index comes in, or as the middle comes in, the index goes out, and then vice versa. Think of it almost like you're walking with your fingers, because then you have two fingers doing the opposite motions. Now, when you're walking with your fingers are straight, and there will be times where we want to do that, but the recovery is a lot slower when you have straight fingers, when you're moving from this back knuckle exclusively. So we want to try to maintain that scratching motion. Okay, a couple more times. Now, when we do it this time, I'm going to start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll count to 4 to start, and then we'll just follow that same tempo and go index, middle, index, middle. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Index, middle, index, middle, index, middle, index, middle. So just pause for a second and try, as you're playing, try to listen to the sound of the two fingers and try to get them as close to the same as possible. I mean, that's the goal. It's very, very difficult to get them to sound exactly the same. There's so many factors going on. There's the amount of callus you have. For me, it's very difficult to get my fingers to sound the same for the simple reason that my middle finger is so much longer than my index. I have to bend it this much to try to get it to be the same length. So if I'm playing the same string, you can see it's actually kind of tricky to get them both to be the same length, but that's the goal. So let's try it again. I'm not going to count because I want you to listen to your fingers as you're playing. 2, 3, 4. Not bad. It's pretty close. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough that when you're playing in a band, when you're in the mix, as they say, you won't really notice it too much. Okay, let's try the same thing on string number 3. We're going to start with the index and we're going to play 4 groups of 4. We're going to do it twice just for time's sake today. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Index, middle, index, middle. 4 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, moving over to the next string, string number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the first string, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, we could have just started playing and just played through 4 times and not worried about the counting, not worried about the tempo, but if you practice in a musical way, when you go to play, you'll play musically. What we want to try to do in most situations, there's some extreme practice situations where this is not the case, we want to try and play musically. So whatever you practice, you're going to instinctively do when you go to play. All right, so let's try to do that now. We're going to go 4, 3, 2, 1, 4 times on each, and then we're going to switch around and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 times on each. But this time, we are going to use the metronome, so you don't have to listen to me count. Okay, although I may count anyway. So here we go, 50 beats per minute. I know it's slow, but it gives you time to really focus on what your hand is doing. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, do what you want to do. Try to make everything intentional. Don't just play and hope for the best, hope that it works out. Try to go slow enough that you do what you want to do. Okay, so here's our tempo. Pretty slow, but again, we're subdividing the beat in our heads, if you've done that lesson already, to make it seem a little bit easier to play with. So string number 4 we're starting with. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. String 3. 1, 2, 3. String 2. String 1. We're going to repeat string 1. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Now string 2. String number 3. And string number 4. There we go. So very important at this stage to always try to alternate, always index, middle, so that every time you start a new string, you're starting with that index finger. Now, we're going to move on to some different groupings. We're going to play 3 notes per string, 2 notes per string and 1 note per string. But we're gonna follow the same pattern. We're gonna go from string 4 up to string 1 and then backwards back to string 4. Now, 3, any odd number grouping is gonna be a little bit trickier only because every time you go to a new string, you're gonna start using a different finger. So for example, when you play string number 4 and we're doing 3 notes per string, string number 4 is index, middle, index. Now to maintain the always alternating your fingers, that means the next finger up, so we've gone index, middle, index, the next finger up is the middle finger. So when you start string number 3, it's middle, index, middle. When you start string number 2, the next finger in line is the index. So index, middle, index. And likewise, when you get to string number 1, you're gonna start with your middle and go middle, index, middle. So a little bit trickier. Try it a couple times, maybe hit pause right now. Try it a couple times without the metronome, without any kind of timing pressure on you, just to get used to the idea, because you'll probably revert to your index finger starting every single string. But let's give it a try. Now, I'm not gonna count to 4 when we start though, because we're doing groups of 3. I'm gonna count to 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. String number 4, index, middle, index. String 3, middle, index, middle. String 2, index. String number 1, we have middle. 2, 3. Now, string 1 again, index, middle, index. String number 2, middle, index, middle. String 3 is index, 1, 2, and string number 4, we're back to the middle. All right, so anytime you repeat the pattern or do it more than once, you'll know you're on the right track if you start the second time around with your index finger. Because whether you're doing even or odd number groupings per string, anything times 4, which is the number of strings we have, will end up being even. So you'll always reset when you come back to your index finger. So now, let's do the same thing, but groups of 2. Now this time I am going to count to 4 because 2 is a multiple of 4. It's just a little bit easier. Counting 1, 2 doesn't give you a lot of time to mentally prepare. So same idea, 2 per string. We're always going to go index, middle, every single string. Here's string number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. String 3, 2, and 1, 1 again, 2, 3, and 4. Now you want to try to have as good of a timing as you can, but don't make that the primary focus of this lesson. We're still reinforcing it by playing with the metronome, but if you're focusing on that, then you probably won't be able to concentrate so much and get as much out of trying to get the alternating fingers. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing, but 1 note per string. So every string we're going to change. It's going to be index, middle, and then we repeat index, middle, middle. And that way, when we get back to the beginning, again, we would have reset to have the index be the next finger in line. Count to 4, and then we're going to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So index, middle, index, middle, index, middle, index, middle. Great, now you can try that at any tempo you want. If you're going to use the metronome and increase your speed, just do it a little bit at a time, probably no more than 5 beats. And you might feel tempted to see how fast you can go, that's great, but if you're actually working on it, try not to go too much more than maybe 5 or 10 beats per day. We're just trying to incrementally build up. Now there is one little thing I want to mention, well it's not a little thing, it's a big thing. One thing I want to mention that you might sound different than I do when you're coming from string 1 to string 4. And we're not going to deal with this today, but I just want to bring it up to explain what is happening. When you're going from string 4 to 1, every time you play a new string, because you're doing a rest stroke, it's muting the previous string that you just came from. However, when you're going the other way from string 1 to 4, all the strings continue to ring. So if you're playing and it sounds really muddy and really ugly and you're coming on the way down, that is the reason why. And we're going to tackle that in a whole other lesson because we don't want to have to think about muting the strings and all that kind of stuff when you're focusing on your right hand. We just want to do one thing well at a time and then we'll tackle the next thing that comes up. All right, so come back for another lesson. We're going to look at yet another variation on this exercise. Thanks a lot.